Hello, class. So I am going to pick up where we left off yesterday on page 156 of chapter 8 in Prisoner of Azkaban. Harry had a moment with Professor Lupin, and Professor Lupin and him talked about why Harry wasn't allowed to confront the Boggart in the closet that he had seen. And so Professor Lupin kind of explained that he thought it would have been Voldemort that came out of the closet, and so Professor Lupin was worried that maybe Harry would freak out or that others would get worried, and so he took over, and Harry was disappointed and explained that he actually was thinking of a Dementor, and that's kind of where we left off yesterday. So once again, page 156 in chapter 8. So you've been thinking that I didn't believe you capable of fighting the Boggart, said Lupin shrewdly. Well, yeah, said Harry. He was suddenly feeling a lot happier. Professor Lupin, you know the Dementors. He was interrupted by a knock at the door. Come in, called Lupin. The door opened, and in came Snape. He was carrying a goblet, which was smoking faintly, and stopped at the sight of Harry, his black eyes narrowing. Ah, Severus, said Lupin, smiling. Thanks very much. Could you leave it here on the desk for me? Snape set down the smoking goblet, his eyes wandering between Harry and Lupin. I was just showing Harry my Grindylow, said Lupin pleasantly, pointing at the tank. Fascinating, said Snape without looking at it. You should drink that directly, Lupin. Yes, I will, said Lupin. I made an entire cauldron full, Snape continued, if you need more. I should probably take some again tomorrow. Thanks very much, Severus. Not at all, said Snape. But there was a look in his eye Harry didn't like. He backed out of the room, unsmiling and unwatchful. Harry looked curiously at the goblet. Lupin smiled. Professor Snape has very kindly concocted a potion for me, he said. I have never been much of a potion brewer, and this one is particularly complex. He picked up the goblet and sniffed it. Pity sugar makes it useless, he added, taking a sip and shuddering. Why? Harry began. Lupin looked at him and answered the unfinished question. I've been feeling a bit off color, he said. This potion is the only thing that helps. I'm very lucky to be working alongside Professor Snape. There aren't many wizards who are up to making it. Professor Lupin took another sip, and Harry had a crazy urge to knock the goblet out of his hands. Professor Snape is very interested in the dark arts, he blurted out. Really? Said Lupin, looking only mildly interested as he took another gulp of potion. Some people reckon, said Harry. Then he plunged recklessly on. Some people reckon he'd do anything to get the defense against the dark arts job. Lupin drained the goblet and pulled a face. Disgusting, he said. Well, Harry, I'd better get back to work. I'll see you at the feast later. Right, said Harry, putting down his empty teacup. The empty goblet was still smoking. There you go, said Ron. We got as much as we could carry. A shower of brilliantly colored sweets fell into Harry's lap. It was dusk, and Ron and Hermione had just turned up in the common room, pink-faced from the cold and looking as though they'd had the time of their lives. Thanks, said Harry, picking up a packet of tiny black pepper imps. What's Hogsmeade like? Where did you go? By the sound of it, everywhere. Deverish and Bangs, the Wizarding Equipment Shop, Zonko's Joke Shop, the three broomsticks for foaming mugs of hot butterbeer, and many places besides. The stuff as Harry? About 200 owls all sitting on shelves, all colour-coded, depending on how fast you want your letter to get there. Honeydukes has got a new kind of fudge. They were giving out free samples. There's a bit. Look. We think we saw an ogre. Honestly, they get all sorts at Three Broomsticks. Wish you could have brought some butterbeer. Really warms you up. What did you do? Said Hermione, looking anxious. Did you get any work done? No, said Harry. Lupin made me a cup of tea in his office, and then Snape came in. He told them all about the goblet. Ron's mouth fell open. Lupin drank it? He gasped. Is he mad? Hermione checked her watch. We'd better go down, you know. The feast will be starting in 5 minutes. They hurried through the portrait hall and into the crowd, still discussing Snape. But if he... You know, Hermione dropped her voice, glancing nervously around. If he was trying to poison Lupin, he wouldn't have done it in front of Harry. Yeah, maybe, said Harry, as they reached the entrance hall and crossed into the Great Hall. It had been decorated with hundreds and hundreds of candle-filled pumpkins, a cloud of fluttering live bats, and many flaming orange streamers, which were swimming lazily across the stormy ceiling like brilliant water snakes. The food was delicious. Even Hermione and Ron, who were full to bursting with Honeydukes sweets, managed second helpings of everything. Harry kept glancing at the staff table. Professor Lupin looked cheerful as well, and he was talking animatedly to tiny little Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher. Harry moved his eyes along the table to the place where Snape sat. Was he imagining it? Or were Snape's eyes flickering toward Lupin more often than was natural? The feast finished with an entertainment provided by the Hogwarts ghosts. They popped out of the walls and tables to do a bit of formation gliding. Nearly Headless Nick, the Gryffindor ghost, had a great success with reenactment of his own botched beheading. It had been such a pleasant evening that Harry's good mood couldn't even be spoiled by Malfoy, who shouted through the crowd as they all left the hall, "The Dementors send their love, Potter!" Excuse me. Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed the rest of the Gryffindors along the usual path to the Gryffindor Tower. But when they reached the corridor that ended with the portrait of the Fat Lady, they found it jammed with students. "Why isn't anyone going in?" said Ron curiously. Harry peered over the heads in front of him. The portrait seemed to be closed. "Let me through, please," came Percy's voice, and he came bustling importantly through the crowd. "What's the hold up here? You can't all have forgotten the password. Excuse me, I'm head boy." And then silence fell over the crowd, from the front first, so that a chill seemed to spread down the corridor. They heard Percy say in a suddenly sharp voice, "Somebody get Professor Dumbledore! Quick!" People's heads turned. Those at the back were standing on tiptoe. "What's going on?" said Ginny, who had just arrived. A moment later, Professor Dumbledore was there, sweeping toward the portrait. The Gryffindors squeezed together to let him through, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione moved closer to see what the trouble was. "Oh my!" Hermione grabbed Harry's arm. The Fat Lady had vanished from her portrait, which had been slashed so viciously that strips of canvas littered the floor. Great chunks of it had been torn away completely. Dumbledore took one quick look at the ruined painting and turned, his eyes somber, to see Professor McGonagall, Lupin, and Snape hurrying toward him. "We need to find her," said Dumbledore. "Professor McGonagall, please go to Mr. Filch at once and tell him to search every painting in the castle for the Fat Lady." "You be lucky," said a cackling voice. It was Peeves, the poltergeist, bobbing over the crowd and looking delighted, as he always did at the sight of wreckage or worry. "What do you mean, Peeves?" said Dumbledore calmly. And Peeves' grin faded a little. He didn't dare taunt Dumbledore. Instead, he adopted an oily voice that was no better than his cackle. "Ashamed, your headship, sir. Doesn't want to be seen. She's a horrible mess. Saw her running through the landscape up on the 4th floor, sir, dodging between the trees, trying something dreadful," he said happily. "Poor thing," he said unconvincingly. "Did she say who did it?" said Dumbledore quietly. "Oh, yes, Professor Head," said Peeves, with the air of one cradling a large bombshell in his arms. "He got very angry when she wouldn't let him in, you see." Peeves flipped over and grinned at Dumbledore from between his own legs. "Nasty temper he's got, that Sirius Black." That's the end of the chapter. We're on to chapter 9, titled Grim Defeat. So I will post this video and tomorrow read you another 10 to 15 minutes of Harry Potter. And hopefully you guys are enjoying it. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.